My name is Lila and I'm 68 years old. I've lived in the same cozy house in Maple Grove for 30 years. It's a small place with a creaky front porch, a tiny garden full of roses, and a kitchen that always smells like something good is baking. This house is my heart. It's where I raised David, my only son, after his dad walked out when he was just 5. It's where we laughed over silly games, cried through tough times, and celebrated every milestone. Birthdays were the biggest deal, especially David's. Every year, I'd plan his party like it was the most important day of my life. I'd bake his favorite chocolate cake, decorate the dining room with balloons and streamers, and invite everyone, neighbors, cousins, friends. It was my way of saying, I love you, David, no matter what. But this year, his 35th birthday, something felt wrong from the start. I woke up early, like always, to get everything ready. I mixed the cake batter, humming an old song my mom used to sing. I hung blue balloons, David's favorite color, and set out plates of cookies and sandwiches. The house looked perfect, glowing with warmth. I wore my best dress, a soft green one that David once said made me look like a garden. I wanted everything to be just right. When David and his wife Sarah walked in, my smile faltered. They didn't hug me like they used to. David barely looked at me, his eyes glued to his phone. Sarah, with her shiny new purse and high heels, gave me a quick nod before whispering something to David. They stood in the corner, talking quietly, while the other guests, my neighbor Mrs. Jenkins, my cousin Ruth, and a few of David's old school friends chatted and laughed. I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling in my chest. Maybe they were just tired, I told myself. Maybe work was stressful, but deep down, I knew something was off. As the afternoon went on, I kept busy, refilling drinks and passing out snacks. Everyone seemed happy, their voices filling the house with life. I caught Mrs. Jenkins smiling at the roses I'd placed on the table, and Ruth gave me a thumbs up for the sandwiches, but David and Sarah stayed distant. Once, I heard Sarah giggle and say something about old people's houses. My cheeks burned, but I brushed it off. This was David's day, and I wanted it to be perfect. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for, the cake. I'd spent hours getting it just right, with thick chocolate frosting and "Happy Birthday David" written in blue icing. I lit the candles, their little flames dancing, and carried the cake into the dining room. Time for cake, I called, my voice bright. Everyone gathered around, clapping and singing "Happy Birthday." David stood at the head of the table, but he wasn't smiling. His arms were crossed, his face tight, like he was annoyed to be there. I set the cake down in front of him, my heart swelling with pride. "Make a wish, sweetheart," I said softly, the way I always did. The room was quiet, waiting for him to blow out the candles, but instead of leaning forward, David looked straight at me and said, "Why are you even here, Mom? This is my day." The words hit me like a slap. My hands froze on the cake stand, and I felt the air leave my lungs. The room went silent, every eye on us. Mrs. Jenkins gasped softly. Ruth's mouth dropped open. Sarah smirked, looking down at her nails. My heart pounded, and for a moment, I thought I might drop the cake. I wanted to cry, to run, to hide, but I didn't. I stood there, staring at my son, the boy I'd given everything to, my time, my money, my love. How could he say that to me, in my own house, in front of everyone? I forced a smile, though it felt like my face might crack. "I'm here because I love you, David," I said, my voice shaky but clear. "I've always been here for you." He rolled his eyes and blew out the candles, like my words meant nothing. The guests clapped awkwardly, and the party went on, but the joy was gone for me. I moved through the rest of the evening like a robot, cutting cake, pouring coffee, and nodding at people's kind words. Inside, I was breaking. When everyone left, I sat alone in my kitchen, staring at the leftover cake. Crumbs were scattered on the table, and a single balloon bobbed in the corner. David's words played over and over in my head. "Why are you even here?" I felt small, invisible, like I didn't matter, but then something else stirred inside me, a spark of anger, hot and sharp. I wasn't just some old lady to be pushed aside. I was Lela, the woman who worked 2 jobs to pay for David's school supplies, who stayed up late sewing his Halloween costumes, who never gave up on him. If he thought he could disrespect me like that, he was wrong. I didn't know it then, but that moment was the start of something big. David's words had hurt me, but they'd also woken me up. I wasn't going to let him treat me like I was nothing. I didn't know how yet, but I was going to make him see me, really see me for the strong woman I am. That night, as I cleaned up the dishes, I made a promise to myself. I'd find a way to take back my respect, no matter what it took. The morning after David's 35th birthday, I woke up with a heavy heart. Sunlight slipped through my kitchen curtains, but it didn't warm me. I sat at my old wooden table, staring at the leftover chocolate cake, its blue icing smudged from last night. David's words, "Why are you even here, Mom?" kept ringing in my ears. I couldn't shake the hurt. How could my son, the boy I raised with every ounce of my love, talk to me like that? I'd given him everything, my time, my money, my whole life. I raised him alone after his dad left us, working long hours at the diner and cleaning houses on weekends. I never complained because David was my world, but now it felt like he'd thrown all that back in my face. I sipped my coffee, trying to make sense of it. Maybe he was stressed, I thought. Maybe Sarah put him up to it. She'd always been a bit cold with her fancy clothes and sharp tongue, but deep down, I knew it wasn't just a bad day. Something had changed in David, and I needed to understand why. That's when I noticed a stack of papers on the counter, half hidden under some bills. It was my bank statement, one I hadn't looked at closely in months. I don't know why I picked it up, maybe a feeling, maybe instinct, but as I scanned the numbers, my stomach twisted. There were withdrawals I didn't recognize, hundreds of dollars, gone every month, sometimes more. One month, $500, another $300. My savings account, the one I'd built up over years of scraping by, was shrinking. I wasn't rich. I'd saved that money for emergencies, for my future, maybe a little trip someday. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone and called the bank. The lady on the line was kind but firm. "Mrs. Leela, those transfers went to an account in David's name," she said. "They've been happening for over a year." I felt like the floor dropped out from under me. David, my David, stealing from me? I thanked the lady and hung up, my mind racing. I thought of Sarah's new purse, their shiny car, the expensive watch David wore last night. Were they living big with my money? I felt sick, but I needed to know more. I went to my old computer in the living room, the one David used to play games on as a kid. I wasn't great with technology, but I knew how to check my email. That's where I found it. Messages David had sent to Sarah, thinking I'd never see them. "Mom's too trusting," one email said. "She won't notice a few hundred here and there." Another from Sarah, "We deserve this more than she does. What's she gonna do with it anyway?" They laughed about it, like my hard-earned savings were a joke. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. Betrayal burned in my chest, worse than David's words at the party. They didn't just disrespect me, they thought I was weak, foolish, nothing, like I didn't matter. I sat back in my chair, tears stinging my eyes. I wanted to call David, to scream, to ask how he could do this to me, but I didn't. Crying wouldn't fix this, begging wouldn't make him respect me. That spark of anger from last night grew hotter, brighter. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me. I'd spent my life teaching David right from wrong, and now he was going to learn one more lesson. I didn't know how yet, but I knew I had to do something, something big. I spent the rest of the day thinking. I walked through my garden, touching the soft petals of my roses, letting the quiet calm me. I remembered the years I'd sacrificed for David, nights I went hungry so he could eat, winters I wore old coats so he could have a new one. I wasn't perfect, but I'd given him everything I had, and this was how he repaid me. By stealing, by treating me like I was invisible. No, I was Lila, the woman who kept going no matter what. I'd built this family from nothing, and I wasn't going to let it crumble now. By evening I had the start of a plan. I wasn't sure what I'd do, but I knew I needed proof. I printed out the bank statements and saved copies of the emails. I tucked them in a folder, hiding it in my bedroom drawer. My hands were steady now, my tears gone. The hurt was still there, but it was mixed with something new, determination. David and Sarah thought they could take advantage of me, but they were wrong. I was going to show them I was stronger than they ever imagined. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the next birthday party. It was a whole year away, but already I could see it in my mind. I'd bake the cake, hang the balloons, smile like always. But this time, I'd have a surprise for David, one he'd never forget. The thought made my heart race, not with fear, but with purpose. I wasn't just fighting for my money, I was fighting for my respect, my dignity, my place in this family, and I was going to win. The days after finding David's emails were quiet, but my mind was loud. Every time I walked past the kitchen table where I'd found those bank statements, my chest tightened. My son and his wife Sarah had been taking my money for over a year, thinking I'd never notice. Their words, "She's too trusting, and what's she gonna do with it?" stung worse than David's cruel question at his birthday party. I was 68, not weak, not foolish, but they treated me like I was nothing. I couldn't let that stand. I wasn't just hurt, I was angry, and that anger was like a fire, pushing me to act. I didn't tell anyone at first. I needed time to think, to figure out what to do. Every morning, I'd sit in my garden, sipping tea and watching the roses sway in the breeze. My house in Maple Grove, with its creaky porch and cozy rooms, was my safe place. It held all my memories, David's first steps, his laughter when we'd bake cookies, the nights I stayed up worrying about him. But now those memories felt tainted. David and Sarah didn't just steal my money, they stole the trust I'd built with my son. I had to take it back, not just for me, but for the woman I'd always been, Lila, who never gave up no matter how hard life got. One afternoon, I called my old friend Clara. She's a lawyer, sharp as a tack, with a laugh that makes you feel safe. We'd been friends since high school, and she knew everything about me, how I raised David alone, how I worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over our heads. I invited her over for coffee, and when she sat down at my kitchen table, I spilled everything. I showed her the bank statements, the emails, everything. Her eyes widened as she read. "Lila," she said, setting down her mug, "this is theft. They can't get away with this." Hearing her say it out loud made it real. Theft. My own son, stealing from me. I felt a lump in my throat, but I swallowed it down. "What can I do, Clara?" I asked. She leaned forward, her voice steady. "We can send them a legal notice. It's a letter that says they have to pay back every cent, or you'll take them to court. You've got proof, those statements and emails are solid. They won't have a leg to stand on." A legal notice. The words sounded so big, so serious. I'd never thought I'd need something like that against my own family. Part of me wanted to call David, to give him a chance to explain, to say he was sorry, but then I remembered his cold eyes at the party, Sarah's smirk, their emails laughing at me. No, they didn't deserve my softness. They needed to learn that I wasn't invisible. "Let's do it," I told Clara. She smiled, like she knew I was ready to fight. For the next few weeks, Clara helped me put everything together. We met at her office, a small room with stacks of papers and a coffee pot that was always on. She showed me how to organize the bank statements, highlighting every withdrawal David made. She printed out the emails, marking the ones where he and Sarah talked about my money. It hurt to see it all laid out, but it also made me feel strong. I wasn't just guessing, they'd done this, and I had proof. Clara drafted the legal notice, a letter that looked official with her law firm's name at the top. It said David and Sarah had to repay the money they took, plus interest within 30 days, or I'd file a lawsuit. Reading it made my heart pound. I'd never done anything like this before. "Are you sure, Lila?" Clara asked, her pen hovering over the paper. I thought of David's voice, sharp and mean, and Sarah's fancy purse bought with my savings. "I'm sure," I said. Then I had an idea. I didn't want to just mail the notice or hand it to them quietly. I wanted them to feel it, the way I felt their betrayal. I decided to give it to David at his next birthday party, exactly 1 year after he'd humiliated me. It would be in my house, with all the same guests, neighbors, cousins, friends. I'd bake his chocolate cake, hang the balloons, smile like always, but this time, I'd have a gift they'd never expect. I told Clara my plan, and she raised an eyebrow. "That's bold, Lila," she said, grinning. "I like it." I started preparing right away. I made a list of everything I'd need for the party, cake ingredients, decorations, invitations. I went to the store and bought a shiny red gift box, small enough to hold the legal notice, and a bright ribbon to tie it with. Every night I'd look at that box on my dresser, imagining David's face when he opened it. My stomach fluttered with nerves, but also with excitement. Would I really go through with it? Could I stand in front of everyone and call out my own son? The answer came every time I thought of his words. "Why are you even here?" Yes, I could. I would. David and Sarah didn't suspect a thing. They'd stop by sometimes, acting like nothing was wrong. Sarah would compliment my flowers, and David would ask for a glass of water like they hadn't stolen from me. I played along, smiling, keeping my secret close. They thought I was the same old Leila, too trusting, too soft. I was planning, waiting, ready to show them who I really was. The fire in me grew stronger every day, and I knew, when the time came, I'd be ready to give David the gift he deserved. The morning of David's 36th birthday, I woke up before the sun. My heart was racing, but not just with nerves. There was a thrill in it, like I was about to do something big. Today was the day I'd show David and Sarah I wasn't the weak, trusting old lady they thought I was. For a year, I'd held on to the pain of David's words, "Why are you even here, Mom?" and the sting of their betrayal, stealing my savings. Now, with Clara's legal notice tucked in a shiny red gift box, I was ready to give them a lesson they'd never forget. I started the day like I always did for David's birthday. I mixed batter for his favorite chocolate cake, the kitchen filling with the warm smell of cocoa. I hung blue balloons in the dining room, tied streamers to the chairs, and set out plates of sandwiches and cookies. My house in Maple Grove looked just like it had last year, cozy, welcoming, full of love. But this time, it wasn't about love, it was about respect. I wore my green dress again, the one David used to like, and I pinned my hair back, standing tall in front of my mirror. "You can do this, Lila," I told myself, and I knew I could. Guests started arriving in the afternoon, Mrs. Jenkins from next door, my cousin Ruth, David's old friend Tommy, and a few others. They hugged me, complimented the cake, and chatted about the weather. I smiled and nodded, but my eyes kept darting to the clock. When would David and Sarah show up? Part of me worried they wouldn't come, that they'd sense something was off, but then I heard the crunch of tires on the driveway, and there they were, walking up my porch steps. David wore a fancy jacket, and Sarah had a new necklace that sparkled in the sunlight. My money, I thought, my stomach twisting. They didn't hug me, didn't even say thank you for the party. They just walked in, looking around like they owned the place. I kept busy, pouring lemonade and passing out snacks, but my heart was pounding. The red gift box sat on the kitchen counter, hidden behind a stack of napkins. Every time I glanced at it, that fire inside me burned brighter. The party went on, with laughter and chatter filling the house. Mrs. Jenkins told a story about her cat, and Ruth teased Tommy about his new haircut. David and Sarah stayed in the corner, whispering to each other. Sarah rolled her eyes when I offered her a cookie, and David barely looked up from his phone. Their disrespect made my resolve even stronger. They thought they could treat me like this in my own home. Not today. When it was time for the cake, I took a deep breath. This was it. I lit the candles, their tiny flames flickering, and carried the cake into the dining room. "Happy birthday, David," I called, my voice loud and clear. Everyone gathered around, singing and clapping. David stood at the head of the table, his face blank, like he was bored. I set the cake down, my hands steady. "Make a wish," I said, "just like always." He sighed and blew out the candles, not even looking at me. The guests cheered, but I felt a calm settle over me. It was time. "Hold on, everyone," I said, raising my hand. "Let's give David his gift first." I walked to the kitchen, grabbed the red gift box, and held it high so everyone could see. The ribbon gleamed under the light. I handed it to David, my eyes locked on his. "Open it, sweetheart," I said, my voice sweet but firm. He raised an eyebrow, like he thought it was a joke. Sarah smirked, leaning against him. "What's this, Mom?" he asked, his tone sharp. He tore off the ribbon and lifted the lid. The room was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking. David pulled out the legal notice, a single sheet of paper with Clara's law firm's name at the top. His eyes scanned it, and his face changed, first confused, then angry. "What is this?" he said, his voice loud enough to make Ruth jump. I stood tall, my heart steady. "It's a legal notice, David," I said. "You and Sarah took my money without asking, thousands of dollars from my savings. Now you'll pay it back, or I'll see you in court." Gasps came from around the table. Mrs. Jenkins covered her mouth. Tommy's eyes went wide. Sarah's smirk vanished, her cheeks turning bright red. David crumpled the paper in his hand, his face twisting with rage. "You're crazy, Mom. We didn't do anything," he shouted, but I held up my hand. calm as could be. I have proof, I said. Bank statements, emails, everything. You thought I wouldn't notice, but I did. You thought I was too trusting, but I'm not. The room stayed silent, everyone staring at David and Sarah. Ruth crossed her arms, nodding at me. Mrs. Jenkins whispered, "Good for you, Lila." David's mouth opened, but no words came out. Sarah grabbed her purse, muttering something, and stormed toward the door. David glared at me, his eyes burning, but I didn't flinch. "This isn't over, Mom," he said, then followed Sarah out, slamming the door behind them. The guests stayed quiet for a moment, then started whispering. I felt their eyes on me, but I didn't care. I'd done it. I'd stood up for myself, right there in front of everyone. My heart felt lighter, like I'd been carrying a heavy load, and finally set it down. I cut the cake, handed out slices, and smiled as the party went on. Inside, I was fierce, proud, alive. I wasn't just David's mom anymore. I was Lila, and I'd taken back my respect. The air in my house felt different after David's 36th birthday party. The balloons were still up, sagging a little now, and the chocolate cake sat half-eaten on the kitchen counter, but something had shifted inside me. I'd stood up to David and Sarah, handing them that legal notice in front of everyone, and it was like I'd reclaimed a piece of myself. I wasn't just the mom who baked cakes and forgave everything. I was Lila, a woman who deserved respect. The hurt of David's betrayal still ached, but the fire in me burned stronger than ever. I'd shown them I wasn't invisible, and now I had to figure out what came next. After David and Sarah stormed out, the guests stayed a while. Mrs. Jenkins hugged me tight, her eyes misty. "You're so strong, Lila," she said. "I had no idea they were doing that to you." My cousin Ruth squeezed my hand, saying, "You did the right thing, they needed to hear it." Even Tommy, David's old friend, nodded and said, "I'm proud of you, Mrs. Lila." Their words wrapped around me like a warm blanket, easing the sting of David's angry glare and Sarah's quick exit. Clara, my lawyer friend, stayed to help clean up. As we stacked plates, she winked. "You were a force out there, Lila. They didn't see that coming." I laughed for the first time that night, feeling lighter than I had in months. But when everyone left, the house got quiet, and the weight of what I'd done settled in. I sat in my living room, the red gift box still on the table, its ribbon curled on the floor. I'd called out my own son in front of family and friends. Part of me felt powerful, but another part, a small soft part, ached for the boy who used to hug me and say, "You're the best, Mom." Was that David gone forever? What I did know was that I couldn't let him and Sarah keep treating me like I didn't matter. I'd given them a year to show remorse after his cruel words at the last party, and instead I'd found out they were stealing from me. I'd done what I had to do. A few days later my phone rang. It was David. My heart skipped, hoping maybe he'd apologize, say he was wrong, but his voice was cold. "Mom, I'll start paying back the money," he said. "But this is messed up, you doing this to us." "No, I'm sorry. No, I was wrong." I waited for more, but he just hung up. I found out later from Ruth that Sarah had left him too embarrassed to face the family after the party. I didn't feel happy about it. David was still my son, and I didn't want him to hurt. But I didn't feel guilty either. They'd made their choices, and now they'd face the consequences. Clara kept me updated on the legal stuff. David sent a small payment to my bank account a week later, the first of many, Clara said. The legal notice scared him enough to start making things right. But I knew it wasn't about the money, not really. It was about respect, about showing him I wasn't someone he could push around. Clara said we could still go to court if he didn't pay everything back, but for now I was okay waiting. I'd already won something bigger, my dignity. With David and Sarah out of my daily life, I started to see my world differently. My house, with its creaky porch and rose garden, felt like mine again, not just a place for family to take from. I decided to make new traditions. Instead of Sunday dinners for David and Sarah, I invited Mrs. Jenkins and Ruth over. We laughed over tea and cookies, talking about everything but the past. I signed up for a gardening class at the community center, learning to grow herbs and sunflowers. I even painted my kitchen bright yellow, something I'd always wanted to do but never did, because David said it was too loud. Now, every time I walked into that sunny room, I smiled. It was mine. I started doing things just for me. I took walks in the park, waving at neighbors who'd heard about the party and gave me knowing nods. I bought a new dress, not green this time, but a bold red that made me feel alive. I even started writing in a journal, something I hadn't done since I was young. I wrote about the good times with David, but also about the woman I was becoming: stronger, freer, happier. I wasn't living for my son anymore, I was living for Lila. Would David and I ever be close again? I didn't know. Part of me hoped he'd come back one day, not with money, but with an apology, with respect. But I wasn't waiting for it. I'd spent too many years waiting, hoping, giving. Now, I was building a life that made me proud. Every time I looked at that leftover birthday cake, I remembered the gift I'd given David, not just the legal notice, but a lesson I was worth more than he thought. And as I sat in my yellow kitchen, sunlight streaming in, I knew I'd given myself a gift too, a new beginning, one where I was the hero of my own story.